Well, hello, everyone. Oh, threw me off. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Owen, and this is my friend Afruze here. And today we're just going to talk a little bit of his journey with faith. So, Afruze, just kind of starting off from the beginning, you based in the Bahá'í faith. That's correct.
That's correct.
Okay, so what was that experience for you like? Was it a good experience? Bad experience? Like, talk a little bit about that.
It was definitely difficult. And the only reason why I say that is because standards and goals that were set by the Baha'i faith were very much a topic of conversation amongst our family. And the challenges that I was school or like hang out with my friends or anything like that, ringing in the back of my head as to like, what would I do if I knew all the answers, right? And when I looked at, like, for example, what the Baha'i faith offered as an answer to a particular problem that I was going through, I tried my best to emulate that. But I found that the manifestation of those standards resulted in a great deal of hardship. But that hardship resulted in the character and like my ability to articulate my thought process and organize what I believed in and my ideas forth. So the result of that, my friends defined to a select goals what I liked and disliked. So faith definitely played a large part of my young life growing up in terms of finding out who I am and who I could be.
I see. I know you've talked about how, your parents came over to Canada, right, as a result of religious persecution. Did you ever feel like there was like pressure upon you to like be like a very
I guess, what do you mean by pressure?
I guess when I say that, just like a sense of like you need to do this, right? You need to be putting your best effort forth in this faith because we put so much into it to come to this place, right?
No. There was no compulsion in that sense, but there was definitely a sense of motivation heading in the right direction in terms of, you know, my parents were very open with us in that we were comfortable discussing certain things with them, and going into the conversation with saying that, okay, but I don't have to hold anything back. So my parents weren't telling me like what to do before I asked the question. They would create a space where the question. So there was no compulsion in that sense.
I see. And then I know you also had talked about, early on, your mom had decided to enroll you into like a Christian school. So could you talk a little bit about how that kind of helped you in the formation of your own faith?
Mm. That one.
All right.
Let's go
So,
with that one.
all right. So moving forward a little bit farther then, let me ask, so a
Wait,
big,
question. Are we gonna edit this part out?
yeah.
Okay, go.
All right. So moving a little bit farther forward, for those who don't know, the declaration is a big deal, right? That's a big milestone in the Baha'i faith of deciding to declare that you have faith in Baha'u'llah as a manifestation or a messenger of God, right? So could you talk a little bit about your declaration experience?
Yeah, I didn't know exactly what I was getting into because, like, the age of declaration is 15, and it's not like you have to declare. It's just that um, being well equipped to know what you're getting involved in or committing yourself to is a process that more attention and more respect than I was giving it at that age. So I had said yes, but I had no idea what I was saying yes to until I, got into conversations with my friends who are much more articulate than I was in the expression of what they believed in. And they were I was sitting down in a conversation at a coffee shop, and they would like have these sessions, and like they were very articulate. They knew exactly what they wanted to say and when they wanted to say it. Very concise, no ums, no ahs. And I observed, myself in terms of who I claimed I believed, and I was not at all on par with them. So, I sat back and I was like, okay, well, what to, refine myself so that I can actually be a contender in these conversations, a participant, if you will. And yeah, I mean, I definitely um, tried my best to refine my ability to better understand what I believe in, what I'm getting in myself involved in. And yes, I did declare at the age of 15, but it was through the process of independent investigation, which is actually a principle of the Baha'i faith, that I better understood what it is that like when someone else asks me like what I believe in, what is it that I actually believe, and I can be able to condense that into like a short 2-minute presentation so that it can both satisfy the question and invite to asking more.
I see. So, I mean, of course, we're not going to have all those answers to every single one of those questions, right? But would you say
Sure.
there was like a preparation of like having these like almost, you might say like basic questions down, like having those answers, and then you were able to like with full intention, like be able to declare?
Yeah, no, I think there was a point in my life that I recognized that a question that I continually asked when I evaluated other, I guess, options that were around me in terms of religion was, if not this, then what? And that question itself has been, the staple of my investigation. The reason is because I tried my best to understand, what would my world look like if said view was the foundation of the world that I lived in. And I vet and understood, and then asked, like, does this actually, have any option in the current society that I live in? And with both my parents and myself and my friends, I came to understand that there were aspects of the Baha'i faith that I just couldn't, remove myself from. Society would benefit from should society apply it. That I personally, again, didn't find in other scriptures. So, yeah, I mean, um, definitely tried to investigate for sure to figure out like how I was better able to um, fit myself in the narrative that the Baha'i faith was offering for humanity.
That's very fascinating. So it almost sounds like you were like living the declaration and then you said the words almost. Would
For
that be
sure,
fair?
for sure.
It's fascinating.
Mhm.
I know you also, when we've talked, you've told me a bit about how you really had those moments, as a youth where you really spent a lot of time just studying the scriptures, right? And it was a hard decision, right? Because that's not what everybody wants to do is just, as a kid, sit down and read all these scriptures, right? So can you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that experience and how that really like formed you in your faith?
Yeah, like large group of my friends, they believed in things, and some were Christian, some were Muslims. I had Hindu friends. I even had atheist friends. And it seemed like, even though it would be arrogant to completely say that I absolutely know what I believe, they at least had some sort of framework that was governing their ability to answer that question. My framework wasn't there, right? So it was difficult at first, for sure. Um, but I guess throughout the throughout time, I was better able to sit down and actually evaluate, who I was in my circle of friends. That I was always quiet, never participated, had nothing insightful to share. I was retaining information, but I wasn't, there was no exchange of information, so there was no conversation, right, between me and my friends. I was, spectating all the time. So I remember, my very first I think realization of the importance of this was when I was sitting down during lunchtime in high school. I remember that during Wednesdays, I think it was the second Wednesday or last Wednesday of every month, there would be a Christian meetup where conversations would happen on various subjects, whether it be questions of denominationalism or specific questions about a particular religion and their views on it. And I had a friend of mine who was a Latter-day Saint, and he ended up sitting down on the stage, and he was just like, sending answers left, right, and center. And I recognized that even though I saw the social side of him, I never saw the philosophical side of him. And the first scripture I ended up reading was the Book of Mormon, and like that was the first book that I finished through and through, and we had conversations ever since. So as a result of that, I read the Quran, I read the New Testament, the Torah, and now my ability to participate in conversation is very much augmented, as opposed to who I was 7-8 years ago, right?
Well, so I wanted to just clarify, was that the first ever book that claims to be scripture that you read in its entirety out of everything?
In its entirety, yeah, that's right.
Oh, wow.
From start to finish, yeah.
That's fascinating. Wow. I guess just kind of moving forward a little bit more as well. I know you've really talked to me a lot about how there's this period in your life, right, where I guess you would have considered yourself agnostic, right? So could you comment a little bit on that? Was it like moving from, what you had grown up with, right, into that sort of period, right? Was it like a gradual slope? Was there just like one event that kind of like made everything happen?
I think there was like sporadic spouts of agnosticism that kind of emerged. I think it still happens now because we obviously don't know everything, right?
Mhm.
So since we don't know everything, we have to be comfortable with saying I don't know, right? But at the same time, the words I don't know can't be the atmosphere that we become comfortable in. If we don't know, we have to seek and you shall find type of idea, right? So I've more of this sentiment of I don't know until I find out, so that I know, right? And my attitude towards that was, towards my I guess spouts of agnosticism was exactly, dealing with it like that, in that if I didn't know something, I would be comfortable with saying I didn't know, right, until I found out. But I definitely was challenged in my conception of the divine, in my view of how morality worked, and where do I come from, like the standard questions, universal questions that we all grapple with. But I guess I have a better understanding as to how um, they work more than I did before. But I would still, maintain the I don't know position, because I don't want to be arrogant in that, I think I know something that other people don't. It's just that I have thoughts. That's it.
Yeah, and I know when we've talked, you've kind of like phrased things as, it's not like I'm not sure, but it's but you still have that sense of like curiosity of like being open towards understanding of plausibility, right? As you describe it. So how would you
Mhm.
say you were able to like transition those like agnostic thoughts into more of like a plausibility, but like also holding, I guess, firm to like, a foundation of like that faith in God?
I think recognition of responsibility is very much a important thing to consider first, because most people that I talk with have, or talk to, sorry, they they are very impulsive in drawing conclusions. And don't get me wrong, I've done the same too, but very impulsive in drawing conclusions as if they've studied particular things.
Hmm.
They're willing to attribute falsity to a particular thing so quick that when you ask them a question, have you ever studied this? they'll say no, and then you ask, well, how are you, attributing falsity to it? You know, it's a very, very good question to consider, because you'd never do this in any aspect of your life, right? If I
Mm,
drive a Camaro and you drive a Lamborghini, for instance, and I say my Camaro is better than yours, right? I should have a good reason for it, right? So these conversations do happen for mundane and trivial things, and we expect, that we actually have evidences lined up, that we've done our research, that Samsung is better than LG, or LG is better than whatever, right?
mm,
Just as an example. But when it comes to religion and philosophy, or spirituality, it's as if that's just, bundled up and put aside, right? So I guess I've tried my best to avoid that, and maintain this attitude of understanding that, okay, well, if I'm going to be going into this conversation, right, with this particular individual, and this person holds these things as sacred, then I need to have an attitude of knowing what I'm talking about, so that I ask questions, as opposed to walking into the conversation with a conclusion already drawn. Because what if he's right? You know what I mean?
mm. Yeah, I guess that leads into my next question then. Like, I mean, obviously, you, from what I understand, you've talked to a lot of different people of many different faiths, right? And it's not simply been like, always the simplicity of when you were younger, right? Of talking to your high school friends, right, at school, right? I mean, there's been
Mm-hmm.
times you've gone to a mosque, times when you've gone to like Christian Bible study, right? I mean, you even like how we connected was because you were looking through different like Latter-day Saint Bible studies and different like, things that Latter-day Saints were doing on Facebook, right? So, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, what kind of like drove you to that, like, I don't know, how should I say, that real like passion towards, trying to interact with people of different faiths?
Short answer, because I'm human.
Mm-hmm.
Long answer, because if I recognize that I'm human and that I have beliefs, then, since other people that are human have beliefs, if we don't interact, then I'm failing in my ability to tap into the humanity of someone else. And for that person to have that conversation is a chance for them to express what they love, right? Through conversation. So um, there are things that, are not obvious to me, right, that other people may have access to, that I would love to know. Because what if that person has the conclusion of something that I've been looking for my whole life? So humility in conversation, has been something I've had to learn, um, because God only knows I haven't been right before, right? Um, And when I do recognize that I'm not always right, then arrogance dies and humility grows. And then, as a result of the growth of humility, then a 4-year-old can teach me something that I never thought you know, was possible. So, uh, and I've seen this happen, like in one of the part of the Baha'i curriculum, if you will. There's these junior youth groups or children's classes, much like Sunday schools, where kids would come to these spaces where they're better, they're, I guess, individuals who are assigned the position of an animator, a person who is um, of an age where they're able to walk with them through their thoughts, and to formulate the certain arguments or certain thought processes, or find out certain things. Like, I've been in that position where I sit across from a 6-year-old and or a 10-year-old, and they just say something absolutely philosophical that, I'm like, that's the exact phrasing that I've been looking for. But if I, maintain that spirit of arrogance, then that 10-year-old doesn't have, the gems that, I would need in order for me to have the next conversation be more healthy and more concise and more articulate, when it comes time for me to discuss what I believe in. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, there's always more things that we can learn from others and right and make ourselves
Oh
stronger,
yeah, 100%.
and not only that, but build those relationships as well, right? Um, speaking of that,
Hmm.
building those relationships and like being able to serve others, right? I mean, for those who don't know, in the Baha'i faith, there's no clergy, right? But there is, those administrative systems in order to like best help other people along with those who are Baha'i, right? And
Hmm.
so part of that, there's many different levels. There's a national level, even down to the local level, right? On that local level, you have the spiritual assemblies. And you had mentioned to me that you actually had an opportunity to serve on your local spiritual assembly. So can you maybe comment a little bit about how that experience kind of helped you grow in your faith?
Oh God, yeah. I mean, as you know, the process of being a part of that opportunity is becoming elected as a result of a voting process ordained within the Baha'i writings. So that election process votes for 9 individuals, right, in a particular locality from among the Baha'is of that locality, wherein they are responsible for the local affairs of the Baha'i community, um, and essentially carrying them out so that the relationship between the Baha'i community and the greater community can grow. So that's how the it's called a local spiritual assembly. So this institution is where I've had the privilege of serving. And when I think about the election in our country, for instance, there's celebration involved in, for example, someone being elected as a prime minister, and that he has now power. Um, I think this is me being elected into the position of the local spiritual assembly was one of the most beautiful moments in my recognition of how powerless I am, like the exact opposite. Um, and I only say this is because I am now responsible for the affairs of the community that I'm a part of. And I don't hold that, a tier above the rest of the community. I'm a part of that community. And whatever we decide when we convene reflects on, is reflected on the writings, so that it affects our community and our relationship with the greater community. So in some sense, what helped me grow, um, or I guess what was helpful. Oh, how do I word this? Hold on, this may be edited out. Wait, can you restate the question?
So the question again is, how did your experience on the local spiritual assembly help you grow in your faith?
Yeah. So yeah, the okay. Omit the first part. I'm gonna restart my explanation. Okay. So ask the question again.
So the question is, how did your experience working with a local spiritual assembly, one of those administrative bodies of the Baha'i faith, help you grow in your faith?
So in my time serving with the local spiritual assembly of my city, um, teamwork was something that I understood very well. In that, if I submitted an idea in the group, um, that I was not supposed to be detached to my idea. And if I was attached to my idea, then I would see my way as right and the rest of the ways as, you know, um, inapplicable. And that in itself is sowing the seeds of disunity, right?
Hmm.
So that taught me a lot in the art of conversation and the art of disagreement. So how to disagree was actually one of the things that I ended up learning as a result of my service with the local spiritual assembly. So a lot of the conversations that we would have amongst ourselves when we do convene is one that ended up helping me recognize, that there are valuable ideas all across the board that I haven't thought of, and that should I just, detach myself from what I think is true, and to, as a third person, sit back and actually listen to what's being said, that there actually are beautiful thoughts that are out there that, if I were to just detach myself, I would recognize it immediately, and then we could actually have a conversation on it, as opposed to, drilling the idea forward that you think is true, and blocking, auditory seclusion as to like everything else that's going on around you, just because people have, said no to you. So that's been one of the greatest things that's contributed to my faith as a result of serving on the local spiritual assembly.
I love that, I mean, we realize our weaknesses, but we're also realize God's power as well, and that's where the real strengths
Mhm.
come.
Totally.
So I just wanted to ask then, right? I know there's